Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples. It's wonderful to see you all here this morning. It's great to have you. We have some visitors here who are here for the first time, and that's very exciting. We have our children and youth back in the sanctuary this morning, and that's very exciting. We have a lot of familiar faces, and that too is a wonderful thing. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples is a welcoming congregation where each of us is encouraged to grow spiritually in fellowship with others by joining in worship and celebration, education, reflection, and discussion. And we strive to do all this in a spirit of acceptance and love. We invite everyone, especially newcomers, to join us directly after the service for refreshments and conversation on the other side of those glass walls and out on the patio. And I also urge you to look in the order of service this morning for the congregational calendar and for all the things that are going on about the congregation. I'll remind you that next week is Bring a Friend Sunday, so you are urged to think of that one person who you feel might just fit within this community and invite them to join you in worship next Sunday. As we begin our Sunday service, I ask you to check your mobile devices to make sure they're in a quiet setting. There are hearing devices for those of you who have a difficult time hearing. There are copies of the sermon in the back if you don't have one already, and there are large print orders of service if you need it. There are large print hymnals as well, so just raise your hand, make yourself known to John or Rick, our ushers this morning, and they will bring them to you. And now let us begin our morning's worship. I guess I'm already feeling very comfortable here because I forgot to introduce myself. I'm the Reverend Tony Fisher, the minister here at UUCGN, and again, I'm delighted to have you here, and I'm very delighted that we have in the pulpit this morning the Reverend Jennifer Dant. Jennifer has been called out of this congregation to ministry, and we're very excited to have her here this morning to offer us a service. Jennifer.
May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery, in miracle, to the universe, to this community, and to one another. May we worship together this morning. Our first hymn is number 301 in the gray hymnal. Touch the earth and reach the sky. This morning, it's exciting to have the children back, and we have a new middle schooler who's going to light our chalice this morning. Aubrey? The words of the chalice lighting are in your order of service. Aubrey does go to school. We'll say the words together. Universal mystery, guide us away from the desire to shine light in all the corners. Teach us to embrace the night, for without the darkness, we never see the star.
So I'd like to have everyone come forward, the children and youth, if you could come forward, grab a stool behind the pulpit if you want to. Sit on the floor if you'd like to. Bring your orders of service.
Bring your order of service because you need it. You can share.
Excellent. I'd also like to invite up those who are teaching our children this year to the front of the sanctuary. This is great. And I think if the teachers can actually stand over on my left over there, that would be great. See if we can form irregular lines over there so we can see everybody. All right.
We're out of practice up here.
Excellent. Great. Okay, you ready? Go ahead. Start.
Oh. Today we start a new year in our religious education program. As you can see, it takes a lot of people to run a good program for our children, and we always need more helping hands. We thank all of you up here and all of you there for your commitment to our program.
And we're also grateful to the parents who have come to this congregation in part so that their children can experience a free and open religious education. Thank you for believing in and supporting this important work.
One of the great innovators in liberal religious education, Sophia Lyon-Fawes, said that it not only matters what we believe, but how we gain those beliefs. Her counterpart in the Unitarian Universalist movement, Angus MacLean, said, "The method is the message," meaning that how children are taught is likely more important than what we teach them.
Without these good people here, and without folks like them across the country, our movement would die. They bring up and raise our children in the faith. So this morning, we as a congregation will covenant with the youth religious education teachers who have been called to minister to our children and thus to our future. A covenant is like a promise that we will act in a certain way with one another. So I'm asking the congregation to please rise with your orders of service in hand. Find the words to the covenant in the inside back cover. Do you, as a liberal religious congregation, covenant to nurture and support these teachers in their work with our children and youth? Do you covenant as well to support the Director of Religious Education as well as the Committee on Youth Religious Education in their work however you are able?
We covenant with the teachers, the students, the religious education director, and the committee. We acknowledge and value the ministry of religious education and pledge to support them all to the best of our abilities. We believe that we are partners in the religious nourishment of our children and youth.
Teachers, you who have chosen to work with our congregation, you may be seated. Thank you. Teachers, you who have chosen to work with our children will have the special blessing of being not only a part of our children's religious development, but hopefully a loving part of their memories in ages hence. Do you covenant with the children, youth, and adults of this congregation to take on the awesome and wonderful responsibility of religious nourishment in your classes, to help your students understand that Unitarian Universalism stands for, what it stands for, and to guide them on their path for truth and meaning?
With the help and guidance of the whole congregation and with love for our students, we heartily embrace this task. We will seek to carry out the wisdom of Sophia Lyon-Fawes' philosophy in all of our interactions with our children and with each other, feeling, as she did, that how we teach is just as important as what we teach, knowing that our own beliefs and actions are like gateways opening up wide vistas for exploration.
Thank you. No matter our age, from the youngest person here to the oldest, what we believe and how we act is indeed important. So I ask the students to stand and to covenant with your teachers and with the whole congregation. And it's written in your order of service, and if you don't have one, find someone who has it, and I'll do the motions to help you.
We covenant to come here.
With open minds, with helping hands, and loving hearts, to have wow moments, to ask our questions, to learn, and to grow with other people.
You can be seated.
And so we dedicate these teachers and all who participate in this program to the important work of nourishing our children's spiritual growth.
Please join us in this last line.
Having and vibrant spiritual community.
Excellent. We'll sing the children out. Go now in peace. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you. So much energy. We enter a time now of joys and sorrows, a time when we can share with one another those deeper thoughts, those feelings that we carry with us during the week, the joys that we have that lift us up, and the deep sorrows that we experience day after day. So if you have a joy or a sorrow that you'd like to share, I'll bring the microphone to you. I hope you'll share your name with us and share what's on your heart this morning. Joys and sorrows. We keep them in our own hearts and in our thoughts as we begin the rest of our worship.
Our next hymn is number 352, Find a Stillness. It is indeed good to find a stillness. It is good and necessary to leave the cares of the week, drop them around you at your feet, rest your thoughts, slow your breathing. It is good and necessary to be present this morning, present to your own being, present to those around you, present to this very moment. We will have a moment of meditation, prayer, quiet reflection. This morning's responsive reading is found in your order of service. We are bogged down by the details of life. We are smothered by detail.
Our bodies fill up with constant anxiety. Our throats are dry.
We would weep, but our eyes have no tears. We would cry out, but we have no passion.
Who has done this to us?
We confess the pain we cause ourselves. May we accept our limitations.
We cannot do everything.
May we affirm our power.
We can do something.
May we open ourselves to larger hope in the silence. So we may not be able to do everything, but we can do something. Every little bit matters. So I encourage you this morning as we receive the morning offering, if you give as much as you can, maybe take one tiny baby step, give a little bit more. And we multiply that by everyone, it truly does make a difference. Morning offering will now be received. For all that is given, for all that is received, we are truly grateful. The first reading for the service today is a Taoist reading. 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes it useful. Cut doors and windows for a room. It is the holes that make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there. Usefulness comes from what is not there. And the second reading we try to find a silent black cat in the empty, dark room. We blindfold ourselves. Maybe blindness will help us to see in the dark. We grope madly this way and that way and finally declare with conviction, there is no cat. Then we sit, still and silent, and the black cat crawls into our lap and purrs. A few Sundays ago, my 17-year-old, many of you know Marina, car keys in hand, along with her friends, said goodbye and drove off towards an afternoon of shopping and hanging out. About 20 minutes later, her father called. He said those 4 words that always quicken my heart and stop my breath. Marina is okay, but... She had hydroplaned on a Mockley road and had come to rest against the guardrail. And Marina got on the phone, assuring she was okay despite her shaky, tearful voice. I assured her cars could be fixed and that all that mattered was that she was okay. As a fairly new driver, this experience actually was probably good for her. But after hanging up the phone, the reality of our human vulnerability, usually kept at bay through well-practiced defenses and denials. They convince us we're in control. All that fell apart and came upon me full force. That adrenaline dump of reality, the reality of how quickly a life can change in an instant. It washed over me, leaving me as shaky and tearful as my daughter. Since then, I've been somewhat preoccupied thinking about how little control we humans have in our day-to-day lives. We believe and think and feel that we're regulating and managing our lives, all the while suppressing or denying the fragile existence of our being. How do we do this in a world that seems unusually chaotic right now? Recently, the world witnessed the violence, the death of Mike Brown, its repercussions and responses of Ferguson, Missouri. And don't forget about Ebola outbreaks. Thwarted efforts to contain that epidemic are causing major strains on West African resources. The media asks, how long before Ebola comes to our shores? Our country is inundated with refugee children while Russia encroaches into the Ukraine. Just last week, the savage beheading of yet another second Western journalist claimed the headlines. And even National Public Radio, usually less alarmist than commercial news sources, claims that ISIS jihadists are only, quote, a plane ticket away from our country. This is a sobering thought, considering that the group is considered too radical even for Al-Qaeda. And if it isn't hard enough to maintain a sense of hope in these turbulent times, let's add to that our own hardships. Personal struggles and difficulties with disease, family issues, economic hardships, the list goes on and on. It is a wonder any of us get out of bed at all each morning. So despite our chalice lighting encouraging us not to shine lights in all the corners, and since as a minister everything has sermon potential for me, I decided to explore just how we do manage to get out of bed every morning. And what I discovered was that there was 2 actual separate questions. One was just how we physically and mentally get out of bed and go out into the world, but also the how of we respond spiritually and emotionally to the getting out of bed, to the stepping into the mostly chaotic and uncontrollable world, and then we actually function within it. So I'll start with the easier question, how we physically and mentally get out of bed to face the world. It's no secret that our brains work to make sense of the world. Many years ago, as a young nursing student, I was taught that brains are like big, complicated computers, functioning with their left side and their right side, an executive part. There's the right brain, left brain. It followed rules delivered as messages through neurons, chemicals, electrical actions, and reactions. However, recent research on brain function, especially now being able to watch the brain activity through MRI, has changed my thinking about brains. We understand control is now shared by differing areas rather than simply coming from that executive prefrontal cortex. This means that brain function is far more dynamic and organic than previously thought. So instead of a computer to symbolize the brain, think more of like a flock of birds or a school of fish flying or swimming together. The animal formations don't follow one lead. Rather, there's methods of systemic communication built into the group. So what, you may ask? This is a Sunday sermon worship service, not an anatomy and physiology lesson. The so what is that as an organic and dynamic system, the human brain is transformed into a system of disorder and chaos rather than a computational, reason and rule-based organ. How does that sit with intellectually smart UUs? And the idea of chaos in the brain is actually good news. And it does relate directly to Sunday morning worship service. But we'll get back to that. As many of you already know, our brains function at two different levels, the conscious and the subconscious, or also called the adaptive unconscious. Some may say we only use 10% of our brains and 90% is unused. That actually is not true. We use 100% of our brain all the time, but yes, much of that functioning is at the subconscious level, so we're not aware of it. And this is the only way we can survive. Imagine having to respond to everything, every little sound, sight, smell, touch at every moment. And relate that to every experience as your brain reacts to those stimulus, every experience you've ever had. Plus consciously keeping your body standing or your head upright as you try to form words to have a conversation. We would quickly be overwhelmed. So selective attention, which happens unconsciously, helps us focus on the important information, while adaptive unconscious helps us interpret and categorize the world into a navigable space in which to exist. This is important to understand because it relates to perception. Without the adaptive unconscious translating the world into our perception of it, the world would be chaotic and overwhelming. But the flip side of this is that our perception of the world as our minds translate it becomes an artificially constructed product of our unconscious and mental processes, as much as it is a result of analyzing real data or stimuli. Here's how it works. My lovely volunteer today. Hold that up for everybody. Take a look at that. See the monsters? Which monster is larger? Oh my God, you guys are such UUs. Honestly, though, I know the answer to which monster appears larger. Right? But as you will see, even though this one appears larger, they truly are the exact same size. So that's our amazing, thank you, our amazing brains taking a 2D image and creating it into something that we can process and understand into a 3D image. Someone could maybe say, they're the same, our brains are making it look inaccurate. But science and teacher Leonard Mlodinow, a director of theoretical physics and author of Subliminal, How Your Unconscious Rules Your Behavior, puts it this way. We accept the visions concocted by our unconscious mind without question, and without really realizing they are only an interpretation, one constructed to maximize our overall chances of survival, but not one that is in all cases the most accurate picture possible, right? So everything comes through our brain, we're processing it, but we all process it just a little bit differently. In other words, we can get out of bed in the morning and carry on partly because our adaptive unconscious works constantly to promote order and understanding within a chaotic and overwhelming world of stimuli. Our brains have a vested interest in ensuring our survival. But the adaptive process, the idea of perception, interpretation can work against us as human beings. Malcolm Gladwell, in his wonderful book, Blink, shares the following story. It's in a chapter called Listening with Your Eyes. It's about female trombone player Abby Conant. This is like the early 80s, 1980s. She applied to summer orchestras in Europe and received an invitation to audition for the Munich Philharmonic Orchestra. Her invitation was addressed to Herr Abby Conant, so our German speakers, Mr. Abby Conant, which is a first indication of what was to follow. Auditions took place behind a screen, which was not that common then, because one of the people auditioning was a relative of someone who was already in the orchestra, so they wanted it to be fair. So Abby was number 16, and she played Concertina for trombone, which has been described as the war horse for trombone auditions. The room was silent, people were floored, and the director called out, "That's who we want." And the remaining 17 musicians were sent home, didn't even get to audition. So needless to say, when Frau Abby Conant walked around the screen, instead of the expected male hair, the judges, especially the very old school conservative conductor, were shocked. They had definite ideas about who could be a solo trombone player and who couldn't. And a woman could not be a solo trombone player. It just was not in the realm of knowing. So the book goes on into details of what happened next, and it included, she spent a year as first chair, a year later got demoted to second chair. There were medical exams to test her lung capacity, her ability to deal with oxygen. There were required evaluations from other experts, all of which she passed with flying colors. But it went on for 8 years. All because under conditions of pure objectivity, the conductor, unbiased by his own perceptions, had cried out, "That's who we want." But what's significant is that he was unwilling to face his own perceptions and prejudices when those were reflected back at him. And this is where we circle back to why the fact that our brains, on the edge of chaos, matters enough to talk about in a sermon. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. You heard some of that in our teacher dedication this morning. And mostly this is interpreted as an individual's right within this community to experience our lives, to draw conclusions and understandings from those experiences, which are then integrated into our worldview, and we're always aware that others are doing the same. So my search, my conclusions, my truth will be different than yours. Whatever happens, however, when we overlay the idea of the search for truth, what happens when we overlay the idea of a search for truth and meaning includes a more conscious awareness of our perspectives, our prejudices, and our fears? How they affect us and influence us is directly related to how free that search really is, right? So you look at the poster, you say, one's larger than the other, and someone else can say, no, they're both the same size. Can we be brave enough to challenge or at least be willing to consider that there may be other ways of perceiving the world? Approaching our own beliefs, your personal way of thinking about the world with the idea that they just might not fully reflect reality, it doesn't demand that they be changed, but it does risk transformation. And if we are willing to approach some of the fears and anxieties, sometimes that appear as bigger monsters than they really are, we keep at bay through workings of our subconscious brains. In what ways will any resulting changes and transformation change the world? So if we approach this as, I might not have all the answers, yeah, this thing really kind of tweaks me and pushes my buttons, and we lean into that, how can we change the world, our community, this community, and us? Recently, I had the opportunity to observe a specific group of people involved in major changes in their workplace. It's been fascinating for me to watch the individual responses to the anxiety and stress caused by shifting of a paper system to an electronic one. I've mostly observed that the people who have more self-awareness about how they react to change and stress, and those who are willing to risk to make a mistake, have mastered the new system the quickest, and with much less angst and upset than those who do not. Catholic scholar and theologian John O'Donohue frames it from a religious spiritual perspective in his wonderful book of essays, Eternal Echoes. In addressing the power of our minds and our thoughts, he writes, "You remain unaware of your freedom to change how you think. When your thinking is locked in false certainty or negativity, it puts so many interesting and vital areas out of your reach. You live impoverished and hungry in the midst of your own abundance." That's huge. You live impoverished and hungry in the midst of your own abundance. For me, I grew up in a family full of generalized anxiety and what-ifs. As a teenager, my father's family experienced a horrific and traumatizing car accident. His 11-year-old brother was killed, and most of the remaining family members had lifelong physical injuries and mental trauma, scars. So this trauma was woven into the fabric of my growing up, even though I had never directly experienced it. And my mother is wonderful and funny and loving, and she is also nervous and frightened most of the time. What if the car crashes? What if something bad happens? What if the plane crashes? What if I make someone angry? What if the lightning comes through the pipes? What if, what if, what if? Again, the words of John O'Donohue. Fear and negativity are immense forces which constantly tussle with us. They long to turn the mansions of the soul into a totally haunted house. What if ISIS attacks the United States? What if Ebola rampages through our people? What if the next time my dear, sweet, and beloved Marina drives off in her car, there is a worse accident? I know firsthand what this does to a family. And all of those what-ifs, we mostly have no control over them. Fleeting and fragile, vulnerable and powerless, humans make their way in the chaotic, neutral forces of the world, pressing themselves upon us. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Back to wondering how or why we get out of bed in the morning? But there is good news. I said it before. Our brains are organic and dynamic systems. They are systems of disorder and chaos rather than a computational and reason rule-based organ. They contain disorder and they work towards order. So congregations, because they are filled with dynamic, organic human beings who carry dynamic and organic brain systems, congregations are also dynamic, changing environments in which there is both chaos and a resulting attempt at order as we bump up against each other. Within chaos, that's where we find possibility. That's where we find creativity. That's where we find adaptation. And we've already seen how personal perspectives can work against us, but it also can be used as a strength. Chaos theory itself shows us the way. One of the characters in a graphic novel called Invisible Monsters says, "Our real discoveries come from chaos, from going to the place that looks wrong and stupid and foolish." So the way to use chaos theory to a positive end, the way into real discoveries, is to invest in a religious community of folks not necessarily of like mind, but of those willing to accompany one another in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, even if that means accompanying one another to the places which may seem stupid, foolish, and wrong. So first point about chaos theory, we've talked about this, your view depends on your perspective. If you're an electron, you may only experience the seemingly random bumping up of the electrons, but if you look from the level of the atom, you would recognize patterns of the electron. Up another level, one sees the molecule containing the atom, and on up and on up. So the loftiest view contains the widest perspective. And isn't this one function of Sunday sermons? To offer different perspectives, a wider view, ideas of what it means not just to be Unitarian Universalist, but what it means to be human in our world, to be the best humans we can be. The source of our religious authority comes through the reason of our own experience, but that's not enough. It must be tested in community. Our view and perspective must be challenged and pushed against, helping us to get the loftiest and widest view possible in order to claim our truth, or your truth. Think about our fellowship circles, our morning forums, the educational program, I'm talking about learning community and the message is the method. All of these assist in giving us a wider vision. Second point about chaos theory, fractals are contained within the system. What is a fractal? Turns out they're important. They are demarcations between elements in a system. Take the example of a broken cup. You break a cup, you glue it, you can use it in its whole, but there's still that demarcation of where it was repaired. Fractal boundaries are the fuzziness gray areas of patterns. They remind us of the impossibility of separate systems ever meshing perfectly. So why is this important? Because in participating in a human system, such as this community, we sometimes react to others' truths as threatening to our own. Someone who claims to be a staunch atheist walks out after hearing religious language. Someone who's a UU Christian snorts derisively and rolls their eyes at a pagan's rituals. Something about that closeness of another's beliefs makes us uncomfortable. Sometimes it brings up old hurts that may seem threatening or painful. But reminding ourselves of those fractals, there will always be space between us. Maybe a way to open up dialogue rather than closing down as a reaction to our own perceptions and assumptions. The negative what if of our own baggage opens up into the what if possibility of new understanding. Not agreement, but of understanding. Our congregations may have an advantage over some faith groups in this. We are more open to ambiguity and exploration, but we are by no means without our own ways of controlling that which we find threatening. Point 3, we know this, all parts of a system are connected. This is commonly known as the butterfly effect. One small change in the system, positive or negative, does have an effect on the whole. Recently, we have had the positive change of welcoming our new minister, the Reverend Tony Fisher. And what I offer to all of us today is a reminder. Where will the shifts be? How will the system absorb this change? Systems theory is an important part of seminary education, but the actual living it, The actual living out in a system made up of dynamic and changing individuals is something very, very different than the theory. And I can tell Tony already understands this. I know that as I see his promise to love us and walk with us through whatever growth, change, and adventures await this new relationship. There will be easy changes. There will be hard changes. Remember this as we move forward together with Tony. The fluttering of each one of our wings affects the whole. Flutter them carefully and responsibly, because no movement is small or meaningless in a system. Fourth and final point, organic changing systems work under a feedback loop. There's a natural rhythm of action, reflection, action. We know something, we have a new experience, we explore it, discover something previously unknown, and then we bring it back to what we know, and we know that in a different way. Remember I said the different areas of the brain work together in interconnected networks? Well, neuroimaging experiences show us that we use those connections, those neural systems to feel the same ones to feel our bodies, as to feel our relationships, our moral judgments, and our creative inspiration. Neuroscience researchers have found that this visceral connection to the body is a huge motivator of creativity. And it turns out that random episodic silent thought, known as REST, R-E-S-T, actually increases our functioning and access to connecting these areas of our brains. Just like that silent black cat in our reading this morning, the longing to understand, the pursuit of peace, the need to find new ways of seeing, of deeper perception and understanding. We long to capture them. They can be most likely found by sitting patiently. The Taoist speaks of the empty space as the place that creates usefulness. When we sit in meditation or daydream through a sermon, move through Tai Chi, hold yoga poses, create something without listening to that internal critic, we strengthen the connections between unconscious and conscious. This opens the door to consciousness being mirrored back on itself. This is a shameless plug for our upcoming Beyond Sunday Wednesday night gatherings. They are much more than simply socializing with each other during the week. They are opportunities to share our experience, to deepen our understanding of our own perceptions by coming together to risk new experiences. You'll notice every Wednesday there's a Tai Chi, there's sort of an artistic pursuit. We hear new perspectives and in turn become more effective justice-seeking people when we learn to get out of our own way. Because in truth, we get out of bed every day because, as our own Mishpati has taught me, we stand in the shelter of one another. Our fears shared become less, and our joy shared grows to twice the size or more. We get out of bed in the morning because we want to survive. We get out of bed because we cannot do otherwise, whether or not we understand the biology of our own survival. Within us burns the spirit of life. Within us burns the fire of commitment. The commitment to walk together in the ways of love and justice, embracing the chaos of the unknown and the uncontrollable, in order together to create a healing force for the world, a faith set free from fear, a world that bends towards justice. May it be so. So our final hymn is in our teal hymnal. For those of you who have sung it before, sing loud. It's a great hymn. We'll be fine. What number is it? 1028. 1028. Love that hymn. As you go forth this week, go your ways, knowing not the answers to all things, yet seeking always the answer to one more thing than you know. Have a wonderful week. Go in peace.